You know, there are a lot of topics that I want to make videos about, but I'm too scared to. In my head, certain concepts for videos have titles so blunt that I feel like I've got to make the perfect, most comprehensive video on them imaginable. I just get really nervous that as a 25-year-old with a limited amount of life experience, I won't be able to capture something as grandiose as... For Valentine's Day this year, I got my girlfriend and I these two bracelets. So long as we've both got our phones nearby, we can tap the bracelet and the other person's bracelet will vibrate. It's just a little "I'm thinking of you." Oh, there she is hitting me back right now, actually. This all came as a result of me making her feel like, whenever she wasn't at home, I was only thinking about her when I was nervous about something and not when she was just at work or whatever. I figured with these, she could feel exactly how often I'm thinking of her. So far, it's gone over great as a gift. That right there is exactly what love is all about to me. Finding ways to make each other happy in spite of our flaws, our mistakes, and our circumstances. It's buying a treat for somebody even though you really shouldn't be spending the money, because you know that their happiness will offset the stress of spending more than you meant to. It's getting a little annoyed about having to drive someone to work because their car's in the shop, and then talking about those feelings and feeling even closer than you were before because of it. It's starting to hate yourself because you see just how much better your better half is, then improving yourself every day so that you can try to match their goodness. Beautiful things keep coming from really painful situations. There's this notion that you shouldn't get into a serious relationship until you've worked on yourself a bit. It's a vague line with no clear goal. When have you worked on yourself enough? When are you good enough to love somebody? Well, I used to think that I was there. Obviously, I'm ready for love. I have a promising career, I'm relatively selfless, and I'm able to stay somewhat happy and focused in spite of my depression and anxiety. Clearly, I'm ready, and all of those failed relationships in the past were because they weren't ready. Well, after a little over 13 months of living with the woman I love, the biggest lesson I've learned is that nobody is ever ready. I think in my head, I had a mechanical understanding of the idea that no person is an island and that you can't truly grow without another person in your life. But I don't think I really had an intuitive understanding of those ideas until about 6 months ago when my girlfriend and I worked through a rough patch that I was so sure that I never could have been capable of creating. Problems that I didn't think I could possibly have. I'm being vague right now because you and I, viewer, are not in love. See, it's kind of tricky. To get a girlfriend or boyfriend or partner or whatever, you have to have a pretty strong self-esteem, maybe even a slightly inflated ego. You have to be able to talk to them about how sexy you are. You have to believe in your heart that you're sexy enough to have it be a good thing when you call them sexy. You have to see yourself as worthy or you'll never get past the third DM. However, there's this moment about, say, a month or two into any relationship where suddenly you need to change out that ego for some pretty intense humility. As far as I'm concerned, the minute that you stop posturing and start talking about all the ways that you aren't good enough is the minute that a relationship becomes serious. I'd go so far as to say that this is the most consistent example of my little definition of love earlier. If the humility thing works out and leads to positive emotions, then you've made beautiful things come out of painful situations, and you're experiencing love. So, why is feeling like you aren't good enough a good thing? Well, it's the same reason that I got her and I these bracelets. We vent out frustrations at each other, and we vent out our insecurities to each other, then we cross-check those little lists against each other and figure out which things we should try to work on and make each other feel better about the things that don't really matter. I would constantly apologize for letting her be bored while I focused on video editing. She would constantly apologize for saying, "I love you" too often. Then, once we started talking about things that were actually problematic and that we actually needed to work on, it became so much easier to not beat ourselves up over the things that needed no apology at all. In other words, that humility phase of our love led to both of us shedding some of our insecurities and getting ourselves solid, tangible goals we could work towards that would make us better partners and better people. I came into this relationship thinking, oh yeah, I know what love is, and I'm totally ready for it. Now, over a year in, it feels more like I don't know exactly what love is, but I'm learning more and more every day. I'm probably not ready for it, but I'm getting more worthy of it every day. It's a perspective shift that was pretty difficult to wrap my head around. I've had a few long relationships before, longer than this one even, but this is the first time in my life that I felt like I was genuinely growing alongside someone else. I'd say to my exes, oh yeah, we're totally gonna get married someday, but every single time in the back of my mind, I didn't really believe it. This time, I do. I fully intend to and fully believe that I will spend my life with this person. And that means that suddenly, these little problems that I have as a person are going to be following me for the rest of my life. My own flaws could very well define the rest of my life if I don't handle them as quickly and accurately as I can right now. That right there is some serious motivation to grow and change as a person. Ironically, it seems to me that the one qualifier of whether or not you're ready for a serious relationship, or if you need to work on yourself first, is if you're willing to admit that you'll never be truly ready. Willing to admit that even though you were perfectly happy being single, you have a lot of growing to do, and odds are you'll always have a lot of growing to do. That growth, that painful acknowledgement of your own shortcomings and eventual triumph over them, is love. So, that was an example of an amazing, beautiful, magical relationship. The kind where you sit there and try to think about a future where you aren't together and can't come up with any reason that that could possibly happen other than an untimely death. Let's talk about a less than healthy relationship. Let's talk about what happens when you aren't willing to grow. To any of my exes watching this, I'm going to be bunching you all up together so as to not single out any individual person. Most of you guys kind of sucked, but hey, I sucked too. So, for just about everyone I've ever called my boyfriend or girlfriend, sorry to everyone else, I've only ever dated boys and girls, there's been this big issue where I always did super well in the flirting phase and the honeymoon phase, where the only real goal is to keep your confidence up while you learn more and more about the other person. And then, once we hit the phase where I was supposed to start getting humble, I'd kind of start to fall apart. Now, I think I've got a fairly healthy amount of humility now, but for a long time I did have a bit of a god complex. I'll still get dysmorphic about my body and body image issues in general and all that, but never once has I considered myself to be the problem with a relationship. Looking back on all these failed romances I've accumulated, though, more often than not, I was a huge part of the problem. I'd be caught up in my own head, thinking about what I wanted to say next rather than really listening to them. I'd be super affectionate, thoughtful, and forgiving, but then think that that stuff excused me from not taking much interest in their hobbies or passions. I'd get on their asses about all sorts of little things that were driving me crazy, mostly just beating around the bush, only addressing the tip of the iceberg, all without talking to them about why certain things drove me crazy. This mindset led to years of relationship dynamics where I'd be telling myself over and over again in my head that I can't stand this person, but rather than have any actual discussion about these feelings and our future, I'd just give them head, tell them I loved them, and we'd go to sleep without a single issue resolved, because I was too much of a coward to stand my ground on the things that I knew in the back of my mind would ultimately kill our relationship. A whole lot of people got dumped by me without ever really knowing what they did wrong. I kept on saying, God, why do all these people never work on themselves? Am I the only person on this earth with any initiative? But what I didn't really understand was that I wasn't giving any of them the space to grow. As affectionate as I've always been, it wasn't until my girl came along that I learned to become loving. So, if you've ever been dating me and I suddenly got all quiet and went out for a drive and you didn't know what you did wrong or how you could make it better, sorry. Well, yes, a lot of you guys have been insanely bad at picking up on social cues. At the end of the day, I was just expecting you to be able to read my mind, and that was unreasonable as hell. Ultimately, all it ever did was lead to both of us deciding that it wasn't worth talking about our relationship problems. We started foregoing the arguments and the tears and going straight to the head and the I love yous and the sleep. And eventually we got to the point where we each became so cynical of the relationship that we just quit talking about our feelings whatsoever, and I dumped you. You know, funnily enough, I've been dumped exactly twice. Once when I was 12, and again when I was 16, when my boyfriend got abusive at a party and then disappeared, never hitting me up again. Every other relationship, I was the one to call it off. Over and over again, I expected people to just fix the things that were bothering me, and I always thought that it was 100% on them to do it alone. And every single one of my previous relationships, I've caught myself saying, yeah, clearly you aren't worth my time, when in reality, I never truly let somebody in until her. Whatever random things we were doing with our bodies, I never once let somebody really interact with my mind. Sure, we'd have tons of cool philosophical discussions and all that. I'd share my ideas and interests with them, but I'd never, ever let them hear how I actually felt about them, the good and the bad. Basically, from the outside looking in, I've always just been the cool girlfriend who'll always run up and hug you and buy you treats and gifts and get really excited when I see you and rub your back after work. But from the inside of the relationships, it's pretty clear that I've been toxic as fuck to a lot of my partners. And some really subtle psychological ways, too. The type of stuff that just makes you feel like there's just something wrong with you and you don't know what to do about it. See, I knew that this was going to be one of those videos where I basically just come to terms with stuff and have revelations about my life live on camera, or at least as I write the script, but this really isn't the conclusion I expected to end up at. That said, it's hard for me to see another perspective on myself, or at least how I used to be, besides what I just wrote. Truth be told, that's how things were going with my girl, too, at the start of our relationship. There was so much good. It was so easy to connect with her about so many different things. She was the first person I dated in years who I thought was genuinely interesting and who I thought could genuinely teach me stuff about the world. But past a certain point, I just started to shut her out a bit. Started to build up my walls again, where I'm constantly in a bad mood and wouldn't tell her why. She was the first person who was ever able to help me get past that. It took a lot of time and a lot of trust and a lot of fear even, but we've gotten to the point where there aren't any little white lies anymore. If she does something that upsets me, I let her know and we talk about it, and we both learn a bit about ourselves and each other, and we grow. And the same goes for her, by the way. I don't want it to sound like I'm just constantly judging people. I make plenty of mistakes, both big and small, but because of this mutual respect we have for each other, it's never the end of the world. Basically, we work it out, we communicate. It's hokey to say, but her breaking down my walls and getting me to finally let another person in, well, that's kind of just the power of love. And I'm a better person now because of it. So this is all just what it means to be in love, from my perspective. Let's talk about how it feels to be in love. I like to give every video I do a happy ending if I can, and there's just nothing in the world that can make me happier than this topic. I'll tell you what, though. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, at the time of writing anyway, and I'm gonna go be madly in love for a bit, and then I'll come back and tell you all how it felt, while it's as fresh on my mind as I could possibly have it. I'll see you all tomorrow. That was a really amazing day. Nobody could ever make me as happy as she does. It's just so obvious. Although, my saying that does betray this weird sense of fatalism that I've had ever since last Valentine's Day when I realized that she was the one. It's a little surreal to feel so confidently in my heart that every single thing I say to this person or do around them will maintain a certain relevancy for the rest of my life. It's a little scary sometimes. Like, say I were to get really angry and say something that I didn't mean. That would just always be there forever. I've never had that feeling before because I knew in all my previous relationships that things would fall apart eventually. That commitment is horrifying. I know I'd pass out right on the spot if she were to propose to me, even though I'm probably ready to say yes. But that's just one side of the coin. Truth be told, it's not exactly a scariness that keeps me up at night. More than anything, the permanent relevancy of our time together is something I really, really enjoy. All of those sweet moments I created with my exes have just lost all their meaning in light of this. Now I know that I'm really building something here. Every time I crawl into bed with her, or scratch her back, or give her a big hug, I know that I'm building memories that I'm always going to look back on with a smile. It's not like all of those other relationships where I look back on our time together with a mix of melancholy, embarrassment, and regret. It's nothing but love that I feel. I'm somebody who's always really shied away from commitment. The whole premise of my old Cruelty Squad video was that the future starts to look very grim from the moment you start getting a clearer idea of what's waiting within it. Frankly, I still hold that view about a lot of things. If I found out that I was going to be a YouTuber for the rest of my life until I retire, I'd probably start to hate YouTube pretty quick. Not knowing when or if I'm going to have a different career is what keeps life interesting for me. But I don't feel that way about her, because every single day she teaches me something new about love and just life. The feelings that I have grow exponentially forever. I have no idea what this relationship's going to look like in 1 year or in 20 years, because I simply can't imagine the lengths that we'll be able to take our love to in that time. We'll have discussed more of our deepest feelings. We'll have seen each other in more and more headspaces. We'll understand each other even better. Whatever I'm feeling now, which I'm feeling strongly enough to write a whole video about it, I'll probably be feeling 20 times as strongly down the road. And that is the unknown. That's the excitement for me in my life. I'm somebody who gets bored very easily. Familiarity has quickly bred contempt in so many different facets of my life over the years. I fear so deeply for the day when most of my passions have been eroded by that familiarity. But no matter how many times I go over it in my head, no matter how rationally I try to think about it, I know that this love I feel will only ever get stronger until the moment I leave this world. And so as long as I'm loving Charlotte, I've got something to look forward to. Thanks for watching. Before I end today's video, I'd just like to give a verbal thanks to my patrons, especially those who donate $10 or more monthly. You're the reason that I get to do sort of weird out there videos like this that I just really want to make. Those patrons are Bree, Messina, Mia Starlight, Stephanie Starfire, Pumpkin, David Bro, Alex, Isa, One-Eyed Willie, Maddie Doman, Denise, You Will Win the Battle You Tell No One About, Miss Lavender, Metamaniac, Ave Lunam, Bo Ya, Delaney, Toma, DJ Jax, The Biggest of Men, Babylon Broken, The Narcissist Cookbook, Asio Batoon, Spooky Ina, Guybrush, Lynn Payne, M. Coy, Cappy, Lake, Eva Knight, Panda, Mr. Coca-Co, Gwen T, Erica, Shay Theus, Gab, Nomad Delilah Chester, Bjorb, Lily Leons, Neris, Fia, Sean Hamilton, Voiced Mute, Haunted Mystic, Charlotte, Kay, Rio, Laura M, Poof Donut, Femboy Fishing, Atheist, Sylvian Pasco, Joannis, IW, Arda Aurelia, Vega Nelson, Demise, Mia Maple, Nicole, Ada Avery, George Rosenbaum, Neurofilter, The Coom Slayer, Summer Celine Guard at Midnight, David Kaiser, Almost Dead Again, Darius Fazier, Big Time Jim, CeeLo, and Violet. My list gets longer every time I do this. I appreciate the hell out of you guys. I'm really sorry that this video took so long for me to make. It was dead simple with like almost no editing to do at all, so I really feel bad about that. It was just a whole Hark, what's that word you said yesterday that I was impressed by? It was a whole cornucopia of problems, and I'm not really going to get into it. I'll probably post about it somewhere, and you can check my socials to see it. But yeah, it really sucked putting this together. I'll have something more produced and hopefully put together more efficiently in the future. I've kind of reworked my editing process into something much more standardized and hopefully logical, so we'll see if I can work more efficiently in the future. Thank you. Have a great week.